Las Vegas considered this pretty much a pick'em game all week. Mississippi State a 3.5-point underdog entering Kyle Field against Texas A&M, but the Bulldogs pull off an impressive win over Texas A&M 35-14. Mark Rogers TV with instant analysis as we bring in Daniel Black, for whom the cowbell tolls. You can catch him and the rest of the staff on SB Nation, the Mississippi State platform for Mississippi State athletics. Daniel, how you doing tonight?
I'm just fine, Mark. Thank you for asking. How are you?
Definitely doing just fine. Big day of college football, including there in the SEC. What jumps out to me about this Mississippi State win, I caught bits and pieces. The defense was exceptional, not just against one facet, but against the run and the pass. Travion Williams, Keith Ford, two capable running backs, especially Travion Williams, difficult to stop, an explosive back. They shut down the run and the pass, 16 of 41, 3 interceptions. So the defense really put the clamps on Texas A&M.
Oh, absolutely. And it's sort of a recurring theme this season. A year ago, under Peter Sermon, who's now the defensive coordinator at Louisville and is struggling mightily there, I believe we ranked somewhere in the 100s and nationally in total defense. And this year, under first-year coordinator Todd Grantham, it's basically taken a complete 180-degree turn. This game defensively, and really the entire game as a whole, was very similar to our game against LSU, in which we won 37-7. In that game, we jumped out to an early 7-0 lead. We gave up a touchdown, but then we continued to just absolutely obliterate them defensively. They barely could move the ball on us. In this game, Texas A&M scored another touchdown late in the game, sort of in garbage time when we had a 35-7 lead. LSU didn't score a touchdown in the rest of our game against them. But you mentioned, just looking at some statistics, they only had 285 total yards, 189 passing yards. Our defensive line has definitely been the strength of our defense, and our front seven as a whole. And it continues to prove that they only got 96 rushing yards today. So it was just an absolutely fantastic defensive performance. It continues to show that dramatic improvement that Mississippi State has had defensively. And when you limit I mean, they have a freshman quarterback, but still, it's a Kevin Sumlin Texas A&M team. They're usually going to be pretty dangerous offensively, especially with a wide receiver like Christian Kirk. Holding them to the number of yards they had and just the lack of offensive production in this game continues to show the improvement that State's had this season.
Mississippi State also with 35 points on the scoreboard offensively, coming off a 45-point effort against Kentucky, in which they really exploded on the Cats in the second half in Starkville. Nick Fitzgerald, of course, the guy that leads the way, 12 of 21 through the air, through two touchdowns. Also rushed the ball for over 100 yards. Arius Williams got the ball the most out of the backfield. Nick Fitzgerald in the offense improving. We talked about him during the regular season and his dynamic playmaking ability, but potentially to make that next step would be for him to become a better passer, a more precision passer. So has he taken those steps, and your thoughts about the Mississippi State effort on offense?
Well, I think Fitz is getting there sort of slowly but steadily. He's still a running-based quarterback. I mean, in high school, I think the story goes he didn't start as a high school quarterback till his senior year, and he ran the triple option. So he's still learning the main facets of how to be a legitimate passer in college football. But it was similar to Dak Prescott. His junior year, he was an okay passer. He was putting a lot better passing numbers than Nick Fitzgerald is this season. But not until Dak Prescott's senior year did we see him really improve as a passer. His number of interceptions went dramatically lower from his junior to senior year, and his number of touchdowns through the air went up considerably higher his junior to senior year. I think that's going to be the same with Fitz. We're probably going to see his main improvement as a passer come next season. He's still an inconsistent passer. He had a couple of bad throws in this game, but not many. He was pretty sharp with his throws when he did throw the ball. And his one interception was a freak interception. It was tipped by a Texas A&M linebacker. It was deflected off of his helmet. It hit another Texas A&M guy, flew about 6 yards past the line of scrimmage, where it was caught by a Texas A&M guy. It was one of the weirdest plays of football I've ever seen in my entire life. I don't know if that was on Fitz or just God working in mysterious ways, but whatever. But I think he threw the ball pretty well. But remembering last season, we ran the ball down their throats. I remember last season when we beat them when they were number 4 in the country. Fitzgerald had a 75-yard touchdown run to begin the game last season, and that sort of set the tone. And Aris Williams had another terrific game on the ground last year. So I think that's basically what we were wanting to do again. We have Mississippi State basically throughout its history, even especially under Dan Mullen, has been a run-based team. Whenever we have a lethal duo of a quarterback and a running back that can both run the ball, like we have with Chris Relf and Vic Ballard, and then Dak Prescott and Josh Robinson, and now Nick Fitzgerald and Aris Williams, in addition to a host of other running backs like Nick Gibson and Kylan Hill, that's when Mississippi State's offense really shines. In this game, we had 369 total yards, 228 of which were on the ground. So that's sort of just fundamental, basic Mississippi State football. I was very pleased with the offensive performance. Fitz, you mentioned, going back to the passing, still has to get sharp with his throws, but I think that'll happen over time.
Mark Rogers TV, glad to be joined by Daniel Black. You can join him and the rest of the crew on For Whom the Cowbell Tolls. It's the Mississippi State platform for Bulldog Athletics on SB Nation. The Bulldogs coming off a huge win at Texas A&M as the 3-point dog, 35-14. Your description of that interception, Daniel, will remind me to go back and see the highlights. I'd like to check the highlights and check that one out, number one. Number two, at some point, somebody has to come up with an interception statistic that blames the wide receiver or something else versus the quarterback, so we have a better and more accurate statistic on interceptions. But looking at Mississippi State, you mentioned the LSU win at 37-7, and because LSU is typically highly regarded as a preseason team, then they blasted BYU. Mississippi State gained much attention for pulling off the upset win at home. And then they go to Athens, Georgia. We didn't know how good Georgia was at that point. They get blasted themselves. Then they lose to Auburn 49-10, and pretty much the nation forgot about Mississippi State and thought this is just another typical 7 or 8 win Mississippi State team, whatever. And then Mississippi State bounces back now, 3 consecutive wins, and based on other happenings with the SEC Western Division, it's possible that the Bulldogs finish second in the SEC Western Division. You got 4 games left. You beat UMass. I don't think there's any question about that. Alabama, Arkansas, Ole Miss. So your thoughts about the stretch drive and what the Bulldogs could possibly accomplish?
Well, I think 9 wins should be the expectation at this point. We saw Arkansas and Ole Miss play against each other today in what was arguably the weirdest game of the week. That was the battle for, more than likely, the battle for last place in the West. If we lose one of those games, that would be a really bad loss. UMass, we beat them last year, and they're not that good, especially not as good as an SEC team. Alabama is the only legitimate threat, and Alabama's Alabama. And the reason you mentioned the losses to Georgia and Auburn, Mississippi State's a really good team, and we've always had the mantra that we develop underappreciated talent, underrated talent. That's what we've always done. Georgia and Auburn are alongside Alabama, especially in Alabama's part, more so in Alabama's part. But Georgia and Auburn, they bring in 4 or 5-star guys habitually. That's what they do because they're elite programs. And Mississippi State's never been able to really go. We've been able to go head-to-head in some cases and rarely beat extremely talented teams, but in most cases, we don't really compete with them. And that was the case with Georgia and Auburn. And with the exception of 2014 and kind of 2013, which is a 13-point loss, we've never really been able to compete with Alabama. I think with how Alabama's dominated almost every single team they play, and they've shown in that game against Texas A&M that they can be vulnerable at some spots, but not many times. I don't have much faith in our game against Alabama, but the good thing is that presents 3 easy games other than that. So I think at this point, 9-3, I'm not going to guarantee it, but it is it's much more likely than not that we end up finishing 9-3, which for Mississippi State, that's almost of historical extent. I think only 4 times prior to this season, Mississippi State has had a 9-win regular season. So it doesn't happen that much in Mississippi State football, and it continues to show what Dan Mullen has done with the program and just how high we've been elevated under his tenure.
I was around for one of those. I believe 1999, the team went 10-2, beat Clemson in the Peach Bowl that particular season under Jackie Sherrill. But as you mentioned, the Bulldogs in good shape. The first topic that we hit on, Daniel, was defense. And I think that's one of the big reasons why Mississippi State should be heavily favored down the stretch versus the likes of Arkansas and Ole Miss. They played an entertaining game today. It was great to watch. Tremendous highlights, crazy game, but neither one of those teams can play defense nearly at the level of Mississippi State, so the Bulldogs should win 3 of the final 4 games. UMass comes to Starkville next week. Of course, as you mentioned, the Bulldogs went there last year and won a shootout 47-35, but in much better position to make that a more comfortable win this season. Then, of course, the other game is Alabama. Mississippi State now 6-2, 3-2 in the SEC after a 35-14 win at Texas A&M. Daniel Black of For Whom the Cowbell Tolls joining us to break down the Bulldogs and the Aggies. Daniel, we appreciate the time, and hopefully we'll see you soon.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me, Mark. I appreciate it.